Welcome to today's webinar on planning for community food systems, opportunity, innovation, and equity in the Global South. My name is Dr. Emmanuel Frimpong Boama, an assistant professor in the Department of Urban and Regional Planning at the State University of New York at Buffalo, and a faculty affiliate of the Food Systems Planning and Healthy Communities Lab. In the previous webinar, we had a deep dive on food system issues in Clarendon, Jamaica. Today's deep dive will focus on Accra, Ghana, and the next deep dive webinar will focus on case studies in India. Before we begin, we thank the following for their support: food systems stakeholders in Ghana, India, and Jamaica, civil society actors, local government actors, FAO partners, and UB Food Systems Planning and Healthy Communities Lab. Now let's begin our deep dive. I'll first provide an overview of the Accra metropolitan area. I'll then discuss community and policy initiatives on food, and then some challenges facing smallholder farmers, and I'll finally conclude this webinar with opportunities to improve and transform Accra's food system. The Accra metropolitan area is home to Ghana's capital city, Accra, and it has a vibrant urban food system. It covers about 140 square kilometers of land and constitutes the most urbanized area in both the Greater Accra region and the country in general. It currently has over 2 million population with slightly more females, about 52%, than males. Approximately 47% of Accra's residents are migrants born outside of the Greater Accra region. About 70% of residents 15 years or older are economically active. Most of the economically active population are engaged in the service and sales sector. In terms of food security among households, in 2008, a survey of malnourished children under 5 years showed that 14% of children in Accra are stunted, 6% are wasted, and 7% are underweight. Among children between 6 to 24 months old, about 45% do not meet the minimum feeding practices with respect to food diversity and feeding frequency. More than 45% of women in Accra are also considered obese, which was about 15% more than the national average. Finally, based on caloric intake and proportion of budget spent on food, 24% of households in Accra were classified as food insecure, and 40% were classified as food vulnerable. To understand the food system in Accra, we must properly reference its historic spatial growth and food policies, which have shaped its food system. The maps you see show the evolution of Accra since the colonial days. Accra evolved as two separate colonial settlements, Danish Accra and Dutch Accra, in 1830. By 1930, after the British took over the colony from the Dutch and Danes, these two settlements grew, merged, and expanded towards the peripheries. During this colonial era, farming of exotic vegetables and ornamental crops was encouraged within the city boundaries to feed European settlers and to beautify their surroundings. The early colonial government was not too friendly to urban farming in Accra. This manifested through the adoption of strict city bylaws and health inspections to ensure a farming-free city. The 1970s saw an increase in urban farming due to policies such as Operation Feed Yourself, which sought to increase internal food production and may have unintentionally led to relaxed bylaws and enforcement on food production in urban areas. Accra is expanding and exceeding the city boundaries, but the sprawling of Accra is complemented by increased density within the inner city areas. Now, the already urbanized and highly populated Accra is becoming even denser. As the city rapidly urbanizes, we see its impact on urban farm areas within the city. Focusing on the red circles shown in the two maps, some urban farm areas identified in 2005 were no longer existent in 2010 because of intense competition between urban farm areas and other developments such as residential and commercial real estate development. Despite being an urbanizing area, farming is prevalent across the urban, peri-urban, and rural areas of the Greater Accra region. Though the characteristics of farming and food systems vary considerably throughout the region. In 2015, nearly 41,000 households reported having engaged in agriculture in the region. About 91% of smallholder farmers within Accra are men with an average age of 35 years. Men are sometimes involved in farming activities that demand low energy, such as watering, planting, harvesting, and selling crops, while men do the activities demanding high energy, such as land preparation. Smallholder farmers in Accra are mostly migrant Muslims from the northern part of Ghana and neighboring countries such as Burkina Faso and Togo. Arable land constitutes approximately 1,000 hectares or 13% of the entire metropolitan land area. The average plot size per farmer in the AMA is less than 0.4 hectare compared to the regional average of 1.7 hectares for the Greater Accra region and the national average of 6.8 hectares. Land parcels for farming are smaller in the urban area and larger in the peri-urban and rural areas of the region. Land tenure is more tenuous in the urban areas of the region. Crops grown in the urban areas tend to be vegetables for sale, which includes tomato, onion, boko red onion, lettuce, sweet pepper, okra, mushrooms, cabbage, hot pepper, and cucumber. Crop farming within the AMA is mostly rain-fed, although some farmers engage in drip irrigation using PVC. Farmers in the urban areas also rely on poor quality water for irrigation. Some farmers use chemical fertilizers, but they are switching to more organic manure because of consumer preference for crops grown with less or no chemical fertilizers. The recent crop attack by the fall armyworm has led to increased use of pesticides. Many farmers prefer to sell more than 85% of their harvest and use the money to buy food for consumption. The crops produced reaches the market through traders, many of whom are women who purchase produce directly on farms and transport the produce to market within the AMA. We will now briefly look at the local government structure in Ghana and later discuss how this structure impacts the ability of local government to plan their food system. Ghana functions under a three-tier decentralized system specified in the 1992 Constitution, Local Government Act 462, National Development Planning System Act 480, and the current Land Use and Spatial Planning Act 925. The top tier includes the centralized government ministries and agencies. The second tier comprises the now 16 administrative regions, and the third tier consists of the local government or metropolitan, municipal, and district assemblies, or MMDAs for short. The Accra Metropolitan Assembly, which is in the third tier, comprises 72 communities. The assembly is headed by a mayor who is appointed by the President of Ghana. There are 16 departments that report to the Metropolitan Coordinating Director, who ultimately reports to the mayor. Planning is broadly categorized into policy and spatial planning. Policy planning is performed by the Metropolitan Planning Department. This department coordinates sectoral programs, goals, and priorities prepared by the 16 departments within the Assembly. The National Development Planning Commission, or NDPC, which is a first-tier government agency, develops policy guidelines for local government to use in preparing their 4-year medium-term development plans, or MTDPs. The central government uses the MTDPs to disburse annual budgetary allocations to the local government. Spatial planning, under the recently promulgated Land Use and Spatial Planning Act 925, focuses on land use, zoning, and development control. The Assembly's Town and Country Planning Department performs this function in accordance with the regional and national spatial development frameworks. There are a number of food initiatives within the AMA. We will briefly mention 6 of such initiatives, some of which are already completed. First, we will look at the Farmer Field School, or the FFS project, which is a collaboration between the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, or MOFA, and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. Farmers are trained in climate-smart approaches to farming under this initiative. Here, farmers build one nursery bed using conventional farming practices, and they compare this conventional bed with an experimental one. They compare the results from both beds to learn lessons on how best to adapt their farming practices. As of 2017, 27 farmers at Korle Bu and 35 farmers at Djohulu and Legon have benefited from this FFS initiative. Then the second initiative we will look at is on food safety and market sanitation. The Accra Metropolitan Assembly, in collaboration with the Ghana Food and Drugs Authority and the Women in Agricultural Development, is educating market women, traders, butchers, and food vendors on proper handling of food. As of 2016, trainings have been offered on meat hygiene, wearing protective clothing, health hazard associated with filthy market, selling adulterated and rotten foods, and effective use of exotic vegetables in cooking. The next two initiatives we'll look at, the first one is on home gardening. The Accra Metropolitan Assembly, in partnership with MOFA, aims to ensure greater food security by promoting home gardening through distributing free seeds and organizing home gardening workshops for interested households. In 2016, around 16 home gardens were established in areas such as Legon, Mamobi, Dansoman, Obosokai, Latobiokashi, and then Osu. The second is also an initiative on technology demonstration and transfer. In 2016, the Accra Metropolitan Assembly and MOFA trained around 403 farmers in the use of new technology to reduce post-harvest losses, seed multiplication techniques, mushroom production techniques, and among others. Women have also been trained in agro-processing techniques. For instance, the Assembly and MOFA have trained women in processing soybeans into soy kebab, soy milk, and chunks. Another initiative is on fertilizer and seed subsidies. The Assembly works with MOFA to distribute fertilizer and seeds directly to farmers at reduced prices. Sometimes farmers are given fertilizer coupons to purchase fertilizer from retailers at reduced prices. Lastly, from seed to table was also another initiative which was supported by the Rough Cities Farming for the Future program. The International Water Management Institute in Ghana, or IMI Ghana, was the lead implementing organization on this initiative. The initiative facilitated local food policy making and financial support for smallholder farmers. IMI Ghana trained urban smallholder farmers in areas such as creation and marketing of value-added product, food safety, and risk minimization. The Accra Working Group on Urban and Peri-Urban Agriculture, or AGUPA, was also established under this initiative to serve as a multi-stakeholder platform to discuss food security and sustainable urban farming in Accra. The Accra City Strategic Agenda on Urban and Peri-Urban Agriculture was developed as part of this initiative as well. Through AGUPA, the AMA bylaws on food hygiene was revised to meet the WHO's standards. Many of the previously discussed local initiatives are driven by national and sometimes supranational policies. We briefly mentioned some of these completed, ongoing, and recently initiated food and food impacting policies in Ghana. Some of the recently completed policies include the Ghana Shared Growth and Development Agenda, which was the overall national development policy from 2014 to 2017. The overall national food policy during this time was the Food and Agriculture Sector Development Policy, or FASTEP 2. Based on the national development and food policies during this time, local governments were mandated to prepare their medium-term development plan to align with the national development and food policies during this time. Currently, we have the Coordinated Program of Economic and Social Development Policies as the overall national development policy, the Ghana National Spatial Development Framework as the overall national spatial development framework, and the Planting for Food and Jobs as the overall national food policy. Based on these policies, local government must formulate their medium-term plans and spatial development frameworks to align with these national policies and frameworks. When discussing food policies in Africa, it is also important to discuss the comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program, which is a pan-African policy framework for agricultural transformation, wealth creation, food security and nutrition, economic growth and prosperity in Africa. The local food initiatives and national policies we just discussed work together in various ways to support Accra's food system. Based on our interviews with smallholder farmers and policymakers in Accra, there are some challenges which limit innovation and growth within Accra's urban food system. Based on our field interviews and careful reading of the literature, we discuss 4 of such challenges and later offer some suggestions to address these challenges. The goal here is to identify opportunities that can help transform Accra's urban food system. The first challenge is more of a paradox. On one hand, Accra experiences flooding each year. On the other hand, farmers interviewed complained about not having enough quality water to irrigate their farms. In an interview, someone expressed concern about the vegetables sold in Accra because he once observed that farmers at Kolebu were watering their crops from the open drains carrying wastewater from the Kolebu hospital and domestic sewage from nearby houses. In addition to water issues, farmers are also facing extreme heat event. According to one farmer, his vegetables sometimes get cooked on the farm during such extreme heat event. The second challenge is about planning and policy dilemmas facing planners and policy makers. When we think of the first dilemma, it has to do with implementing comprehensive food policies at the national level. On one hand, national development and food policies are comprehensively formulated. On the other hand, the government does not have enough money to implement such comprehensive policies at the local level. As a result, some specific policy actions are sometimes selected and implemented uniformly across all local government in Ghana. For instance, fertilizer and seed subsidies was selected as a policy action to be implemented throughout all local government. However, in some local government, farmers have different priorities other than fertilizer and seed subsidies. For instance, in one of our interviews, a stakeholder posed this rhetorical question: what's the point of fertilizer subsidy if farmers' crops are destroyed by rainfall or pesticides? To this stakeholder, smallholder farmers in his local government jurisdiction have more pressing needs than fertilizer and seed subsidies. This brings us to the second dilemma. Since all local governments are expected to align their medium-term plans to national policies, some planners we interviewed felt that there is little room for them to be innovative in addressing certain pressing matters in their medium-term plans. As one planner explained, we seem to be practicing bottom-up planning, but we feel as though we are going through a process to come up with ideas that only checks off NDPC's boxes. According to this planner, since the planning and policy agenda is already decided by the National Planning Authority, which is the National Development Planning Commission or NDPC, local government cannot add certain issues to their local planning agenda. There are budgetary implications if your plan does not conform to the national planning guidelines. Another challenge we also need to pay attention to when discussing Accra's food system has to do with the failure of urban planners to protect urban farm areas. As part of our interviews, one of the policy directors at the Ministry of Food and Agriculture mentioned that it is not entirely correct to say that there are no lands for farming in Accra. Rather, Accra is poorly planned such that pieces of land are scattered haphazardly throughout the city. The Policy and Planning Director at the Ministry of Inner City and Zongo Development also confirmed this statement. According to him, there are vacant lands that could have been properly planned to support urban farming in Accra. For instance, he noticed that the nearby Asumdue Park, where the late president was buried some few years ago, is now vast, abandoned and used as a sex hub.
but it could have been designed to support urban farming. He also mentioned that the Accra Metropolitan Assembly could have made provisions to support vertical farming, such as rooftop gardens. Because urban planners have failed to secure urban spaces for farming, smallholder farmers in Accra are farming under high-tension pylons and on government-owned land in areas such as Kolebu. The last challenge we will focus on is about the perceived financial unattractiveness of smallholder farmers. Some farmers, for religious reasons, cannot pay or charge interest on loans. Others cannot access loans from financial institutions because they don't have the collateral. As a result, some farmers secure so-called interest-free loans from their clients, such as aggregators or market women. They repay the loans by allowing their clients to harvest crops, and sometimes the quantity of harvest is negotiated ahead of time. Many of the farmers are realizing that these so-called interest-free loans come with an economic penalty because their client or buyers often over-harvest crops as repayment for the loans they've taken. I've so far looked at the landscape of Accra's urban food system, and we have also discussed some of the challenges inherent in this system. The question remaining is, how can we leverage existing opportunities to address some of the challenges? The goal is for us to transform Accra's urban food system. We focus on 4 of such opportunities here. First, there is an opportunity to establish a network of urban land trusts as a means of securing urban land for farming in Accra. We can begin the process by mapping all the scattered vacant lands within the city and determine which ones are suitable for farming. In partnership with the central government agencies, non-profit, and financial organizations, the Accra Metropolitan Assembly can consolidate all the vacant lands under an urban land trust, which can be owned and managed by a separate governmental or non-governmental entity or both. Owners of these vacant lands, especially traditional authorities, can be compensated through an intergenerational amortization approach. That is, rather than paying a lump sum to the current chief or clan or family leader, farmers who will farm on these urban trust lands can pay fixed yearly rent over an agreed period of time. The next opportunity is to leverage existing digital platforms to establish a private sector and technology-led urban nucleus food program. The nucleus program can consist of registered farmers who operate within an urban land trust. These farmers can be linked through a digital platform and can have access to their own financial lending institutions, extension officers, aggregators, traders, and so forth. Within this nucleus program, the digital platform can be used to track information on farmers, aggregators, traders, farming practices, crop yield, hygiene practices, crop contamination levels, crop prices, and so forth. The platform can also be used to disseminate information to farmers on climate conditions, pests and diseases, tips on fertilizer application, and so forth. During our interview with stakeholders in Accra, we learned that there are plans to implement such a nucleus program through a partnership between the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, a non-profit organization, and Isoko, a private information and communications technology firm. We must also consider turning Accra's perennial flooding into an opportunity to harvest and treat rainwater, which can be used to address water scarcity facing both farming and non-farming households in Accra. In an interview with an official at the Water Research Institute, we learned that there are efforts at developing rainwater harvesting systems by the Water Research Institute, but financial support is needed to scale up such effort. To transform Accra's urban food system, there is a need for policymakers to learn how to pilot policy interventions before rolling out an entire policy. Piloting policies before they are fully implemented provides opportunity for learning and adjustment. Similarly, Public-private food initiatives should have clear exit strategies for private entities involved. For instance, the previously well-developed Accra Working Group on Urban and Peri-urban Agriculture collapsed right after private funding from rough cities ended. There is a need to discuss how privately funded initiatives can be sustained even before such initiatives are rolled out. And in conclusion, the Accra metropolitan area has a considerable number of opportunities that can serve as the basis of an innovative, equitable, and sustainable food system. Each of the challenges we discussed can have specific solutions. However, the urban food question is a systems question, which requires a systems answer. That is, we must understand that all the challenges discussed are interrelated, and therefore, the solutions we propose must also be well aligned and integrated. This is why in our last webinar, we will introduce you to a systems framework called the Opportunity, Innovation, Equity Food Systems Planning Framework. The framework will help us think through a systems approach to engage community actors to improve and accelerate the transformation of Accra's food system. Thank you all for listening. Once again, we thank our partners, and our appreciation also goes to the field support team in Ghana. We will now invite questions and comment on how to improve and transform Accra's food system.